What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Startup Storybook. I'm Daniel. We got Wes, Turner. Then we have our guest, Ryder McNeal, on the pod today, founder of Prevo. Ryder, thank you for joining us, brother.
Thank you all very much for having me. I'm super excited.
So your business is Prevo Streaming.
Yep.
I could try and explain it, but why don't you give us the rundown of what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we essentially take films from film students and filmmakers who are early on in their careers, those films that have gone through the film festival circuit, which is sort of the standard way for young filmmakers to get recognized in today's, film industry, right? And we take those films that have gone through the film festival circuit. They've often won a lot of awards, gotten a lot of accolades and everything, but most of the time they just end up sitting on a hard drive somewhere because like big companies like Netflix or Paramount or whatever, they don't distribute like short films and documentaries that are usually made by those kinds of filmmakers, right? They might see a filmmaker and say, hey, this guy's really talented, we ought to put him on this other film, but they don't actually take those films themselves, but we do. And then we put them on our platform and we stream them so that way anyone who signs up for the platform can watch those films on their computer, iOS, Android, whatever it might be. And then we launched a year ago, actually almost a year ago to the day, on July 31st of 2024 last year. And since then we've sort of grown and evolved, and we've kind of put greater emphasis on putting out resources and content of our own. For example, interviews with industry heavyweights, a newsletter, like a film equipment gear guide, that kind of stuff. And we just want to be like an all access pass to indie film for, both filmmakers and film enthusiasts. And I think that we are well on our way to being that.
That's super awesome. I mean, I think the film space is definitely one that's you have to be somebody to um, get your film out there very
Yep.
certainly easily. So I think it's really awesome that y'all are doing that. So
Mhm.
what's your experience with film? I know you just graduated from your undergrad at SMU, doing a master's now.
Yes, yeah. So my interest in film has been sort of a lifelong thing. I have never been someone who wanted, well, for a brief time I was, but not in a very long time. I was never someone really interested in the creative side of it. I didn't really want to be like a director or a writer or anything like that. I was always more interested in the business angles, so the producing, the distribution, that kind of stuff. And so when I went to SMU undergrad, which I graduated from a year ago, and I'm getting my MBA there right now. When I started at SMU, I was only in the business school, and then about a year and a half in, I was like, I love film so much, I've got to add on the film major, right? And so I was double majoring in marketing at the business school and then film at the film school. And while I was at the film school, I started producing a ton of movies, right? And for those who are watching who are not super familiar with the producing angle, basically what that is handling all the logistics of creating the film, all of the contracts, and then figuring out the best ways to distribute that film, get it in front of people, stuff like that, right? And so I started producing all these movies, and I was meeting people who were creating movies of their own, and they were going all around and winning all of these awards at film festivals across the US. And I was like, wow, this is so exciting. There are all these great films. And then I would check back in like 3 months and I'd be like, whatever happened with that amazing film that was winning all of these awards? And they're like, well, nothing now. It's on to the next one. And I was like, well, that seems like a kind of a shame, right? And so that's sort of how I got into it. One day, I mean, I remember I was working, I had just finished talking, or rather, I was on the phone with this girl who was a colleague of mine at school. And she was sort of talking about the distribution strategy for her film that I had produced. And we were sort of talking, and on the phone while I was talking to her, this idea just sort of like hit me, right? And then I remember I was like anxious to figure out if this already existed. And so I kind of cut the call a little bit short, and then I ran to my computer and did research for like an hour, and I couldn't find anything like it. And I was like, this might be one of those rare moments where you get an idea that nobody else has at least executed on. And so that's sort of how we got to where we are now.
That's awesome.
Wow. Now, I'm the more technical kind of person, so I'm kind of curious how you're doing that from a technical perspective. Like, what is the process from getting someone on board, like they want you to produce it or to push it along? Now, how does that work, technically speaking?
Yeah, yeah, so in terms of, like, and you mean in, sort of terms of, like, finding films for the platform, right?
Yeah, sure. And then like just getting
Yeah.
it from start to finish.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So, well, I'll sort of walk you through it, sort of on, like, the producing angle too, and then I'll sort of flip around to what I do now. But, from the producing angle, it was really always a matter of, number 1, if you've got a bigger production, you're going to need, and not all film like student productions are like this, but if you've got something that isn't backed by a film school, then you need to fundraise, right? And so a big part of that would be coming up with, a really great marketing, sort of not necessarily campaign, but materials, right? A lot of the time, people might put those materials on a site like Seed and Spark, which is great for, kind of crowdfunding for your films, right? And then a lot of it is going around to different people and sort of convincing them to give you maybe, $500 at a time, right? And sort of accumulating all that money. And then once you've got that, you can sort of move forward and this is just assuming that you've already got a script, and then you put your cast and crew together. Most of the time, if you're doing anything as far as indie goes, a lot of people are just going to be working for free because they're not in unions yet, because they're not at that stage in their careers, or almost for free. But the beauty of those sort of films in that stage is that people just want the work, right? And people are so happy to be doing the work and actually getting the chance to be on those film sets that even if nobody's getting paid, it's the best atmosphere in the world. I mean, it's really, really wonderful. And so let's say that you shoot the film after you've rented the equipment and everything. Renting equipment, by the way, can be really expensive. After you do that, it's, usually 6 months to a year of editing. Usually you've got to hire an editor. Sometimes they're kind of more the sticklers about getting paid. And I totally understand that because it's a huge time commitment on their end. It's not just, a couple weekends. It's, all nighters all the time, right? So let's say you pay for an editor, they get that done in about 6 to 9 months. Then you start submitting your film to festivals. And, the film festival submission process is a very, very long one, right? Because each festival costs, I'm not sure what the exact average is, but it's, easily $50 to $75 a lot of the time, right? And so to really, if you've got a great film, no matter how good it is, you've got to kind of submit it to a large variety of those festivals, right? So then you're spending thousands of dollars again just to get your film seen by anyone, right? And then let's say that it gets into and is accepted by a lot of those film festivals. You might have to drive a couple hours out of your way to actually attend the festival, and then, sometimes you might not even be able to afford to go to the festival, right? And then you just get an email that you won some award and you're like, oh, great. And then before Prevo, you would spend about 6 months, sending your film around on the festival circuit, right? Winning awards, hopefully. And then that would pretty much be it. It would sort of be like, a slot machine, just hoping that someone who matters, who has some connections at one of those film festivals, would see your film and be like, wow, we've got to get this person on board, right? And so that's sort of how it was originally. But now this is where, now that Prevo exists, where we come in and we approach the people who have made that film and say, hey, listen, you know, we want to take your film and promote it as much as we can. It doesn't cost you any money to submit it, doesn't cost you any money for us to market it. We just want to sort of take it over. We're not going to restrict you in terms of sending it around to film festivals or anything like that. We just want to have your film, be able to show it to people, show it to as many people as possible, and promote it, maybe kind of, do some like writing about it and everything, maybe interview the filmmaker, that kind of stuff, right? And so we're all about just raising their profiles as much as possible. And yeah, so far it's been going well.
And y'all don't take any payment or equity from them for the movies?
No, no, no. So the traditional film festival model is that, as I said earlier, you've got to pay like $50, $75 to just submit your film, right? And it's non-refundable. So even if you get rejected, you don't get your money back or anything, right? And so we, instead of doing that, we have decided that instead of charging filmmakers a very high price, we are going to charge viewers a very low price.
Mhm.
And festivals already charge attendees hundreds of dollars, right? Whereas we charge our subscribers only $5.99 a month for a permanent catalog that's always growing that you can rewatch at any time, as opposed to, and once again, we work with film festivals, not against, but, I think that we are offering our filmmakers and our subscribers a wonderful, wonderful deal, and that the filmmakers, I mean, they don't even have to be subscribed to sign up and send it to us, right? So it's totally free on their end because, I've worked, as I said, on the other side of that in producing, and I always thought that it was terribly unfair that we had to pay to be giving festivals content. And I understand that festivals, because they have a much higher sort of expense model and everything, they have to do that. It's understandable, but I think that if you're a digital platform, there's, no reason for you to be charging. So, yeah, that's how we do it.
Wow, that's really cool.
So
Thank you. Thank you.
have y'all found that people like movie critics and the type of people who would get a film into a big box, have you found that those people are subscribing to Prevo and looking for films there?
So the people who have been the most interested in Prevo over the last year have been the people who see it as a way to discover talent, right? And that's not only with people who have subscribed, but with people that we've talked to about, potential partnerships, potentially coming on board, all that kind of stuff. We've connected, and we've been very fortunate in the fact that we've been able to connect with a lot of people who are very talented and very experienced in the industry. And the number one thing that they always say is, man, this would make the talent discovery process so much easier because right now you've got all of these, people who work at Paramount, let's say, who have to go around the country all day long, going to all these different film festivals and, trying to find something. Whereas we present a curated catalog where they can go, they can see who the best actors are, who the best directors are, who the best lighting people are, without having to do all that. And I'm sure that they still will go to all those film festivals because no matter what, they have to because they are looking for features and everything. But we make the process of finding those very early stage filmmakers easier.
Yeah, that
And
makes
who
sense.
are they exactly? Are they generally young um, students or just young people in general making their own films?
I've sort of been surprised because when I started the company, I expected that it would be sort of, primarily just film students, right? Or maybe not just, but, primarily film students because those would be the people most who have fewer festival distribution options than filmmakers who are a little bit older and might have bigger budgets. But it's actually been kind of the opposite. We've seen a lot more submissions from people who are older and kind of have bigger budgets, which going into year two now in like 2 days, that's actually something that I want to change. I want to, 2 days as of the time of this recording, um, I want to kind of change that. I want a greater emphasis on those film schools and those film students because I mean, just the other week, we got 2 submissions from film students who were seniors when they made them. They're a little bit older now, but, the films are like a year or 2 old, and they're thesis films, and they are, I mean, really, really, I mean, incredible stuff on par with people who are in their mid to late 20s. And I think that film schools and film students need to sort of recognize that the quality of their work is on par with people who are a little bit older, and they need to sort of more accurately attack those distribution options, right? And so that's something that we are looking at very, very much heading into year two is getting more and more film students on there because we want to also continue building out that sense of community, get filmmakers more connected with one another. We've got a few features coming out in the next few months that I can't reveal right now, but there's going to be a lot of that connectivity and that community aspect moving forward. And I think that film schools are a great way to do that.
So how many total users and filmmakers do y'all have?
Oh boy, I'd have to check for the exact user amount, but we've had several hundred filmmakers submit their films. I'm not exactly sure of the entire number represented right now, but I do know that we've had several hundred submit. I'll never forget. So one really cool thing about Prevo, and this sort of goes back to the community aspect, but we've always had this element, was that we launched with a feature where if a competition is ongoing, so we wanted the ability to host different competitions, right? And so we have a built-in feature where anybody who's a subscriber or a filmmaker can go on the site and vote for their films or their friends' films, whatever they might be, in 5 different categories like best picture, best director, best acting, that kind of thing, right? And then we have like a leaderboard. And so we've hosted 2 competitions now. The last one was about 6 months ago, I believe, maybe a little bit less. But I'll never forget the first day that we launched that second competition, and we put in like I think that we put like $100 into like Instagram ads or something. It kind of caught fire, and we got like 90 submissions in like 3 days. It was crazy. So as I said, we do curate it, but we do sort of want to allow different people of different skill sets and at different points in their careers to be able to put stuff on Prevo, right? And so we have always sort of separated that out between sort of like the younger filmmakers, maybe they show promise from, a very early age, like, freshman or sophomore year of college, or maybe even senior year of high school or something like that. Then, there are like the thesis films, and then maybe there are like the upper tier, sort of early 30s or something filmmakers who are putting out stuff that looks like indistinguishable from a major Hollywood picture, right? But we want to cater to all 3 of those because, even if you've got a film made by an 18-year-old who maybe doesn't have perfect lighting because they don't have like a $10,000 lighting kit, right? That their lead performance or their writing or their script or something like that is, I mean, it can be just knockout, right? I mean, really, really incredible. And so we want to be able to highlight those different aspects. Even if the overall thing isn't perfect, we do want to highlight those films that have something special about them.
And is that where y'all came in with providing equipment? Because you saw these younger people who don't have access to the high quality equipment still doing amazing things without it? You're like, "Well,
Yes, yes. So the way that that sort of works is we don't provide the equipment directly. However, what we do, and this is sort of like a brand new thing, right? Is that we put out weekly like equipment guides where people who are signed up can see the best deals, right? And so if sometimes it's restricted by location, but like at the very top, you'll have nationwide, these are the best film deals. They can be delivered to you, or maybe it's production houses that are all over the place. And then if you're in Los Angeles, or you're in New York, or if you're in Dallas or Houston, whatever it might be, we sort of break it out there. So we're all about trying to improve accessibility to that equipment, and the sort of the at the lowest price possible. But we don't provide it ourselves.
understood." Very cool still.
Something that I'm curious about. You're saying we. So what does your team size look like?
Yeah. Okay. So we have interns and everything. I think we're up to 18 people now, which I'm yeah, yeah, which I'm like super happy with. So originally, so a friend of mine, well, not, well, well, it's sort of a funny story. So a few months before I graduated from SMU undergrad, I was like poking around on LinkedIn one day and just sort of looking for people who also went to SMU undergrad just to, make connections, that kind of thing, right? And I saw this guy named Colt Waller, and he had gone to SMU as well, graduated, I think, 2 years before me. And he was working at Miramax at the time, which is sort of a huge company in the entertainment space, right? They were sort of famous for distributing like Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction and everything in the 90s. So they've been like a big indie player. They had a rather disreputable founder who had went through the whole Me Too process quite a while ago. But they're still around, and they're still doing great stuff. And Colt was working there, and I thought, hey, I'm just gonna like cold message him. And so I messaged him, and then we sort of talked on the phone. And I didn't bring up Prevo. It was sort of, maybe like 4 or 5 months away from launching at that point. But I just asked him about his career and, if he had any advice for me or anything like that. And so we spoke, and then a few months later, before Prevo was, and, maybe 2 months later, when Prevo was like 2 months away from launching, we sort of reconnected, or maybe he had seen something about Prevo on my LinkedIn. I don't exactly remember, but either way, he sort of reached out and he was like, "Hey, I'm curious what you're doing with this Prevo thing, that you're going to be launching in a few months." And so we talked again, and he had so many great ideas and everything. And I said, "Colt, I think that with your great ideas for the company," I mean, he just like instantly understood the vision for it, what it could be, how great of kind of like a talent scouting platform it could be. He just sort of instantly got it. And so I said, "Colt, I think that I'd like you to help me with this." So he came on board as a partner before we launched. And he's been sort of instrumental in connecting us with people within the industry and everything. He's just been really, really wonderful. And then on top of that, a few months ago, we started a new campaign of bringing people on board. And so we brought on like 10 interns and then more people to sort of oversee. As I was saying earlier, I want a bigger sort of university presence. So we brought on some people to look at that, people to look at, sort of strategic connections and everything. So with all of that, I think that we're up to 18. I've got a list somewhere and I can count them up, but I'm pretty sure that it's 18. But Colt has been there since the beginning. So yeah, everybody's just been wonderful. Literally not a bad experience yet with anybody. I mean, everybody who has worked with us has been so just determined and enthusiastic about the vision and everything. So I couldn't be happier with the team that we've gotten so far.
That's awesome. So you have obviously you had this great idea for Prevo after talking to your friend, and coming to where you are today, you have this platform that I'm certain was very difficult to set up, and it's running. One of the big things with the people we have on as our guests are they're the people who did it, right? Like lots of people have
Mhm.
ideas, but y'all are the people who actually went out and figured it out. So, can you walk us through, maybe not in extreme detail, but what you had to do and how you had to think to get that from the stage of just having an idea after talking to your friend to where you are now and where you are going in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was always something in the back of my head where I was, looking, maybe not looking for, but hoping, or looking for like opportunities, right? I hadn't started a company before, but I had always wanted to. That was always something that was hugely interesting to me.
And
And to be producing movies takes a certain element of, even when they're student films like what I was producing, you're still fundraising and organizing and getting people involved and getting people excited about it and sort of pitching it to a lot of people. So I think in some ways, 2 years of producing those student films and a couple indie films, very small indie films, sort of prepared me with that mindset of how to, organize a lot of people and fundraise and all that. But, I think I had the original idea and I thought, man, I really, yeah, because I don't really have any, I didn't have much coding experience. I had like tried to, many years ago, I had learned how to code just barely because I thought if I ever have an amazing idea for an app, I want to be able to make it. And so at the time that I sort of learned how to code, I didn't have any idea. I just thought, I should have a sort of basic understanding of how it works at the very least. And so when I had the original idea for Prevo, I was like, I really don't know how to do this though. I mean, there's all this, data and, streaming and all that. But, the number one thing that I did was just started reaching out to as many people as possible. Like there's some online, sort of resources and everything where you can get connected with programmers and all of that. And we sort of took, a few like third party, very like base features, base, like tools and stuff, and connected them all. And that's sort of how we, got to that MVP of, Prevo, right? And so once I had that, it was a lot easier to, bring people on board and say, hey, can you build out this feature over the course of a few months? Like the voting thing, for example, was much more complicated than I thought that it would be. The video streaming part was simpler than the voting system. The voting system was like impossible to do. It took forever. But that's sort of what it was. It was really, I felt that I had too good of an idea to not try very hard to figure out how to execute it. And then it was just a matter of finding the right people to do it. I knew right away that it was something totally out of my wheelhouse. But I knew that I had to find people to help. And I was very lucky that I was able to do that. So
I think that's a great point, that you're not always the right person to do everything. Like, obviously, you're the right person to come up with this idea and lead it, but having the humility to go and ask others for help right off the bat, I think that's something that is obviously showing intelligence and maturity, but also it, um,
I no, I and I'll definitely take it. I think yeah, I'll tell you, kind of a funny story, which is I when I sort of came up with the original idea, I took like a month to really think about it and, all of the different number one, make sure that there wasn't like some glaring competitor that I didn't know was doing this, right? And then to sort of take a look at, okay, what are all the different metrics here? What's the long-term strategy? Is this a viable strategy? Are people going to, buy this? And so a lot of that was going around to filmmakers and film festivals and speaking not only to filmmakers themselves, but to people who like to go to film festivals, right? Because they would ideally be and logically be the same audience for Prevo, right? And so once I got positive, confirmation of the idea from all of those people, I sort of put it all together in a pitch deck. When you're a marketing major, that's one good thing. You do learn how to make a deck, Canva or PowerPoint or whatever. And so I put together like a deck over the course of a couple weeks. And then sort of a wonderful like mentor of mine to some degree was a professor at the time at SMU, and he was a film professor, and he had sort of helped me because I had very ambitiously gone to him on like my first day of film school and said, I don't really know anything, but I want to produce a film, and he was like, he was like, okay, you seem confident or whatever. So he sort of put me in touch with people, which of course kind of kicked off my producing journey of a couple years, which then led to this idea. And so I thought he seems like a pretty smart guy. He's the actually head of SMU Film right now, a guy named Mark Cairns. But I put together this deck, sort of outlining the whole strategy. And I said, hey, listen, I've got this idea. And I kind of like put it in an email to him. And I said, I'd love to just come and talk to you about it a little bit further. And he said, okay, meet me in the SMU editing lab, at this date and time. And the editing lab at SMU, I don't really know how it is anywhere else, but it's just this like room with all of these like chairs and like a Mac at each one. And it's like in the basement of this one building, so it's kind of dark. And I was like, okay, I'll meet you in there. And so I brought in my computer and I had like the deck pulled up and everything like ready to go. And then he walked in and he just sort of like started asking me questions and I sort of just abandoned the deck and we just like talked for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. And he was like drilling me with really, really difficult questions. And I sort of, was able to answer each one. And by the end, he was like, I think that this is, a very interesting idea and I want you to pursue it and I want you to keep me updated. And to this day, he's actually been one of our biggest advocates and everything. But that's sort of, after the initial idea, I would advise anybody who thinks that they're really onto something to find someone who is, believes in you as a person, but has that quality where they're not going to be afraid to ask you really difficult questions, because that's just an amazing way to stress test an initial idea. And he could have pointed out something very obvious that I had missed that would destroy the whole thing, right? But thankfully, he did not, and nobody else has. So, we're good there. But I would just advise if you've got a new idea, find someone that you trust and that is supportive of you, but will ask you those difficult questions. So, Yeah. Sort of a tangent there.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Well,
Um, so I'm thinking, unless you remembered your thought from before, Turner. All good? All right. So I guess then, one of the things that we're trying to do with our audience is just basically trying to encourage them to make the jump, pull the trigger, whatever analogy you want to use.
Yeah, right.
So obviously, like we're trying to get over the hurdles. And so, what would you say is one thing that you didn't see coming that happened to you, or that you came across, and you were able to push through? How did you do it? And what advice would you give for other people that are going through that as well, or something similar?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, to some degree, I've been, like, very lucky because, I sort of came up with this idea, and then I got really fortunate. SMU had some, like, pitch competitions and everything, and I was able to go in and win those and sort of, it wasn't like a huge Herculean effort to get, like, all of this, to get, like, the initial funding, right? Just enough to sort of come up with that MVP. And, since then, it's been largely, um just it's an idea that people like to believe in, right? And people want to get involved with. I'm not sure, to what degree that has to do with me or just with the idea, but I think the biggest hurdle I think that, anybody in your audience, especially those who are still in school, would obviously come across is the time commitment, right? And I think that that just goes back to what I was saying earlier, where if I had tried to do this all myself and, learn how to build a streaming platform from scratch, right? It would have never gotten done. I mean, it's just impossible, right? But by the same token, I would have to tell people that, for people like me who started it while in college, there is literally no better time to start a company than when you are in college, because it might seem like you have less time than ever, but you actually have more time than ever. Like, a full time job, you're there all day, you're coming home, you're tired. Um, I mean, maybe with a lot of caffeine and staying up all night, you can kind of counteract that, but really, college is the absolute best time to do it. And I think that was sort of, an element of my trying very hard to get it out, as quickly as possible, because or not as quickly as possible, but, sort of set to work on it right away. I had sort of a sense of urgency because I felt that, I've got like a year left in school. I think it was precisely a year left, when I had the idea, and I was like, I've got like a year to make this happen and launch it. Otherwise, I'll probably never get the chance to do that again, right? Because, as I said, you've got more time in college than, out of school or anything like that. So my recommendation would be, if you're looking to overcome the biggest hurdle, which I think solo entrepreneurs or almost solo entrepreneurs are going to face, which is that time commitment problem. And number one, even though a lot of people are going to think, this is counterintuitive, start it in college. Number two, um, make sure to surround yourself with people who can be faster and better at certain tasks than you would be.
do you feel like you missed out on things that senior year when you were working on Prevo every day, 24/7?
Honestly, I had a really good sort of 3 years before that, and I think that I never felt that I was missing out on anything because I enjoyed, sort of building Prevo so much, and like I said, there was a certain, anxiety to it where I felt like if I didn't really, get it knocked out, then, maybe I would lose that chance forever, right? And so I think that never really occurred to me that I was missing out on anything, but I've also been sort of lucky. I've always enjoyed working, but, at least for the first 3 years and everything, I had a really good time, so maybe there was a part of me that was like, "Okay, I've had enough, fun and everything. I'd really love to just sort of throw myself entirely into this," and I had sort of done that before, maybe in the prior year and, like, my junior year with a lot of producing and stuff. I just sort of got more and more into that, like, just sort of obsessed with it to some degree. And then I think that when Prevo came along, which was sort of a, counterbalance, sort of the next stage of a film, after producing, it's kind of distribution, right? And so I think that I just sort of transitioned that time that I was obsessed with producing into being obsessed with distribution with Prevo. So no, I didn't really feel that I was missing out on anything. I felt fortunate, I guess.
That's great. And
Do
as
you
a
have a
master's,
super long-term vision for Prevo, like where it could be one day?
Yeah, I do, for sure. So, the sort of long-term thing is that we always want to remain a hub for, people being discovered, young filmmakers, film students, all of that. Like, none of that is anything that I ever want to change. But, going forward and even sort of in the immediate future, kicking into year two here, and over the past few months, we've been putting more and more emphasis on stuff that we actually create, right? Like I said, interviews, newsletters, guides, um, all of that kind of stuff, right? And we sort of want to continue ramping that up forever. And I think that the ultimate version of that would not just be producing newsletters or interviews or stuff like that, but taking a really successful filmmaker or student who's been on Prevo and maybe has a perfect idea for their next script and approaching them and saying, "Hey, listen, we want to reinvest in you and we want to give you enough funding to execute on your vision, take your film around to film festivals, win all the awards that you want, and then it's going to come, live on Prevo." And so we want to long term reinvest and invest very heavily in our filmmakers.
You want that Prevo original.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yep. Yep.
So other than the funding that you won through the pitch competitions, has has it been bootstrapped mainly? I don't know
Yeah,
if you know.
so yeah. So, like I said, well, I'll just sort of tell you the full story. So, um, shortly after I had the original idea, and then I took it to my film professor, and he okayed it and everything. There were these posters all around campus for the SMU Big Ideas pitch competition, which is essentially you come in and you can win like $1,500, I think it was, right? And I had seen those because it's an annual thing. It's been going for a while. I had seen those posters my freshman, sophomore, and junior year, and I had always thought to myself, "Man, I wish that I had an idea that I could go in there and pitch." Right. And so my senior year, I finally did, and so I said, "Okay, I'm going to go in there." And so I went in and I won like whatever the maximum prize was. There were a few people who won the maximum prize, which I think was like $1,500. I can't remember, but and then like a few months that kind of gave me enough money to build out, like I said, like the MVP and everything, but not enough to like do the apps in particular and to build the voting feature, which I really, really wanted. And so then, it was sort of perfectly timed by the time that I had finished doing the MVP build of everything with that original winning. There was sort of the part two to that competition, which had much bigger winnings, right? And you had to present like a detailed business plan. It was much longer, kind of a more grueling process and everything, but still, in essence, a pitch competition. And so I went into that, and the maximum prize was $5,000. But, and this was, really wonderful to SMU and to everybody there. I, went in and we all pitched. It was, maybe a couple dozen people, something like that. And I remember they were announcing all the winners in like this big, like kind of room with all these people around and everything. And they were getting down to, they were handing out all these checks, maybe like a dozen checks for $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, right? Whatever. And $5,000 was the maximum. But then they get down to the last because they were handing out these big checks, like the kind that you hold up. And they only had one left. And I was like, I'm not sure if that's gonna be me or not. And then they flip it around and it was for $7,500. And they said that they had wanted to, like give me extra. And I was like blown away. I mean, I was really like bowled over by that. And I was, just so happy. And, it was really great though, because a lot of the people who also won money that day, I've kept in contact with, and a lot of them, well, actually all of them that I've kept in contact with, they are still building out their businesses and are doing just fantastic. But it was kind of like a humbling, wonderful experience to get that kind of like above and beyond like top place prize. And I was like, okay, I've really got to throw myself into this now. I felt like there were more like people sort of, betting on me to some degree. And so with that 7,500, I was able to get the apps built, the voting feature, everything. But then there was sort of the question of like marketing and everything. And so right before we launched, about a month and a half before we launched, about 3 months before we launched, there was this other SMU competition called the Impact Lab, and they invest in companies. It's more so like a VC thing. They will actually like invest and take a part of your company, a small part of your company, which is great for like founders and everything. But they sort of launched this pitch competition essentially, but this time you had to submit like all of these documents and like Excel file on top of Excel file of financials and projections and all of that. And so I went through that process, did the final pitch, and then they came through with another round of investing sort of like a month before we launched, which was amazing because that gave us the funds that were needed to do that initial marketing push and everything. So, pay for that competition Instagram ad that I mentioned earlier. So they were fantastic, and so that's sort of been the entire history of funding and everything so far. So as I said, I've been fortunate that we've sort of just had success on each of those three attempts. So
Something that I'm curious about, it's kind of two questions, but the first
yeah.
one is, would you have described yourself prior to Prevo as entrepreneurial, like outgoing, trying to come up with business ideas, or was it just you landed on this one and then?
Sort of like when I was, like I said, like freshman, sophomore, junior year, I would walk by that pitch competition sign and say, "Man, I wish that I had an idea for that." And I wouldn't say that it was so much like really like scouring anything, like trying to come up with like niches or anything like that that had been untapped or like white spaces in any certain industries, right? But it was something that was always on my mind, and I was always thinking like, okay, if I ever come up with an idea, whatever it is, if I'm going to make sure that it's viable, then I'm going to pursue it because I think that I sort of always had the mindset like, you might only ever get like one good idea for a business, right? So if you get one and you validate that with research, then you better pursue it. So to that degree, I was entrepreneurial. I had my eyes open, but I wasn't like, you know, scouring, let's say, for ideas.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, you kind of answered what would have been my second question, so
All
that's
right.
good. No, you're good. You're good.
Uh, I feel this to be a fun question. What's your favorite
Yeah.
movie?
Oh, probably Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was sometimes I would say Casino by Martin Scorsese, but right now, probably Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which actually they're coming out with a sequel to, and the first on-set images of that of Brad Pitt dressed up in that outfit and everything again leaked online today. So maybe on another day I wouldn't say Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but it's definitely top of mind today. So that's the answer you all are gonna get.
nice. I am the
Ryder,
most.
would you have any advice for young filmmakers who are trying to make it nowadays in 2025?
Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely it's difficult to it's more difficult in many ways because the industry itself has never been so well, not in a very long time, has been so in flux. Between the COVID kind of set everything back, and then there were the 2023 writer strikes and everything, but I had the opportunity to interview a gentleman named Scott Rosenfeld, who was the producer on Home Alone and a lot of other like classic 80s and 90s movies, right? And so I had sort of asked him a similar question. And he said to me, yes, it is more difficult in many respects. However, it's also never been easier in many respects because, you know, um, 20 years ago, your average person like you or I, could not take their iPhones and go out and make something really creative, post it on TikTok, post it on Instagram, or if they want to do something more long form, submit it to Prevo, right? And that kind of stuff. The Instagram and everything might not get you discovered, but it is an easy way for you to sort of start creating and at least start learning, right? that's a big thing. And then even if you're not getting, picked up by the industry right away, as I said, you're ideally making connections, you're getting people to reach out to you. So if you can make something really creative in like a minute, then that's a great way to maybe get, ten or $15,000 to make something that's 10 minutes long. And then that's on Prevo, and then, maybe you get discovered, right? And so that's the pipeline, I think, is really sort of rebuilding itself from something that was destroyed a few years ago, or kind of it's been in the process of being destroyed since like the early 2000s, because the 90s was really sort of a heyday for indie production, like I said, with Miramax and everything. And so that really hasn't existed in a while. But I think that we're seeing the beginning of that pipeline opening again. And obviously, the goal would be that Prevo will play a major part in that. So those are my thoughts. Is just go create something. Just, whatever it is. Never stop creating. And another writer that I actually interviewed one time said a lot of writers and everything who are writing scripts or for TV or for movies, they get like one script. They finish like a movie script, and then they just spend the rest of the decade or whatever, just like shopping that one script around, trying to get someone to buy it. Whereas that writer told me, that really you've got to never stop writing. You've always got to be putting more stuff out there, right? Getting people's eyes on new things. And I think that's the exact same way with filmmaking, is whether you're shooting something on a phone or on a $20,000 camera, never stop, because eventually someone somewhere, hopefully at Prevo, hopefully on Prevo, will get their eyes on it. And so yeah, that would be my advice, which is sort of plucked from two other people that I've spoken to. But yeah, there you go.
Do you feel like the film industry has gotten a little complacent in the last few years? I'm thinking about like recent movies. They're making another Jurassic Park and Happy Gilmore 2 and like all these almost reruns that aren't necessarily as creative in my mind because they're not anything new. They're just um, reminiscing, I guess.
I completely agree. And I think, that's sort of another, two more things that have helped Prevo is that, the demand for shorter form content has never been as big as it is right now. And Prevo kind of caters to that, right? So people might not want to sit down and watch a 2.5 hour movie, but, 10 or 15 minutes, yeah, why not, right? Um, and then the other thing is that I think that people with Hollywood's endless remakes and sequels and everything, people are starting to get fatigued by that. And I think, over the next few years, there's really going to be a huge demand for that original, for those original ideas again, which is exactly what happened in the 90s. Hollywood had gotten very comfortable in the 80s and everything with these big sort of movies that were all sort of very, samey. And then in the 90s, people were ready for like a palate cleanser of really new stuff. And I think that we are approaching there. Now, granted, there's Jurassic Park, or that Jurassic World movie. I didn't see it. It still made money and everything. But I think that Happy Gilmore 2 came out on Netflix a few days ago, and apparently it was like the number one watched like in the U.S. premiere on Netflix ever. So sequels and remakes and everything are still going strong, but they're not as strong as they used to be. And I think that, as I said, people are getting more and more ready for a palate cleanser. So
Do you think it's a cycle?
I do. I definitely do. Yeah. I think everything in Hollywood it's very cyclical. I mean, 100 years ago, we had the greatest invention in the history of film, other than like the camera, which was sound, right? And so when that happened, it was like a major disruption. Some young companies adapted sound and everything right away and started making kind of like low budget movies, but that had sound. And then a lot of the bigger companies were making huge budget movies, but they refused to adopt sound, right? And within, like a decade, all the people who refused to adopt sound were sort of killed off. And that, sadly, to some degree, included, like movie stars and stuff like that who had never learned how to, like voice act and everything, but only, face and body act. They no longer had careers, and, companies went out of business and everything. And I think that we're sort of, we've been seeing that to some degree a lot since, over the past decade with like streaming and everything. And then COVID obviously accelerated that. And so I think that, that's just another example of, when there is a technological innovation in Hollywood, it is bound to disrupt. That's great for the people who get in early and sort of capitalize on whatever that innovation is, but it's not so good for the people who refuse to adapt, right? And so as you said, sort of everything in Hollywood, in my opinion, very, very cyclical, including that sort of trend between kind of indie filmmakers turning into blockbuster filmmakers and then making the same movie, 5 times in a row, and then sort of bringing in new people to make new stuff. So, yeah, definitely.
Along those lines, how do you know whether to follow the trends and stick with the no audio and do
Mhm.
what's the norm? Or how do you know when to pivot and try this new thing that could work, could not work?
The thing is that, in like different industries, like tech is an industry where people adapt new things very, very, very quickly. Like Instagram or Meta, I guess, whatever, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. They've been sort of like masters of this, right? Like they saw, many years ago that like TikTok was getting popular. And so they capitalize on pushing out like short form video content and everything, right? And, a lot of companies like that are very, very good at doing that. Netflix, for example, is great at adopting new things like instantaneously. They're very, very on top of it. But the problem is that, and I mean no disrespect to any, major Hollywood institutions, but entertainment in general, or at least the filmmaking industry in general, is one that really um, prides itself sort of on its tradition, which is hugely respectable. Like that's sort of one of my favorite things about it. And you see that reflected in like Los Angeles a lot, like in a city in general, because you get a lot of sort of reverence for like old things, old restaurants, old buildings, you don't get like that sort of horrible thing where people are like tearing down historic buildings and building like ugly skyscrapers, right? And that's one of the best things about the industry and the city and everything. But that is not kind to them. That sort of mindset in times of huge innovation or upheaval. And so I think that's something that people are going to have to take a closer look at. I think that some people in the industry who are at the tops of these various companies are very much on the ball and sort of adopting that kind of tech perspective a little bit more. I'm not saying that the tech perspective is perfect, but adapting to change a little bit faster, and others are not. Whereas, and the funny thing about that example is that tech companies like Apple, for example, are more obsessed with accomplishing stuff in the traditional sense as far as entertainment is concerned than sort of dominating what they're usually good at, right? So they're always, pushing for like theaters and everything, which I'm happy. I want to go see F1 in theaters too, but it's an interesting dynamic there. But
That
does
makes
that
sense.
sort of yeah, 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 yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. I think
Great.
it's a hard line to walk on because you don't
It is.
know. I mean, there's so many examples. It's hard to almost choose one, but you never know as a business owner when to follow the trend of AI or not to follow it.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I was gonna say the one exception, and who knows, maybe I'm thinking like the people that I just criticized here, but, like AI is something that I think a lot of people are going to point to as like a great inflection point, and obviously it is one of those huge sort of innovations that might shift everything, but I really think that unlike sound, unlike streaming, AI in film is something that no one likes except the executives because the executives get to do it more cheaply. Audiences don't like it. And I think that's going to be the major difference there. And why, even if studios do adopt it, I don't think that audiences are going to like it. Like sound and streaming, audiences love those, and they loved those when they first came out. AI, I mean, the backlash is huge whenever companies say that they might use it, right? So I don't really see that as a good avenue going forward. I don't see that there, but I think a lot of people, I think that's going to be a hot button topic for a long time. So
Because I've seen all this AI generated like movie clips and things like that, and it looks completely real.
I
You
know.
know, do you think it's kind of a threat to the human creative spirit, if you will?
I I do. However, I think that the instinct there, and I would hope that it is, and I think from everything that I've seen from like people reacting to that and everything, is that people have an aversion to watching something that is AI that either they don't know is AI or that doesn't sort of that doesn't present itself clearly as that, right? And I think that people just instinctively would have sort of an aversion to watching something that is completely artificial. I think that there's just something sort of hollow there. Like I know that there was that video that went viral a few weeks ago of the kangaroo like holding there was like this AI generated video of a kangaroo holding like a boarding pass, and the it was a TikTok, and the caption was like, "Oh, this emotional support kangaroo was denied entry onto like a United Airlines flight or something," right? And it's sitting there like holding the boarding pass, and it looks very, very real.
I saw
But
that.
then, yeah, it was AI. And then, but the thing was, is that then people figured out that it was AI, and they went from, "Oh, this is so cute," to, "Oh, I can't believe that this fooled me," right? And so I think that as time goes on, even if you can't tell that something is AI right away, you're going to be so on the ball to check whether or not it's AI that
Want to interrupt
people are
something
going to
real
be
quick.
fooled. Yeah.
Do people have that same reaction to CGI though?
No, but here's the difference though. I think that at that point, you've got so much people are aware of how much effort, how much human effort goes into that CGI, that I think that it doesn't really trigger the same reaction because in a sense, it's still I mean, it might as well be like a painting or something, I mean, it's sort of more like that. Now you could say, well, somebody could be sitting there and prompting the AI, right? And is that art? I don't think that it is. I think that's, I don't think that people sort of mass market would think that it is. I do think that AI is going to be a huge factor in children's entertainment. I think that that makes sense. I think that'll be huge. I think that's the one market where it'll probably like, I mean, I don't know if the children's, like, creatives and the writers out there survive, AI. I mean, I hate to say it, just because I think that that's something that AI could do pretty easily, not because it's, not difficult to do or anything like that, but, children are less picky. I mean, we all know what stuff they watch on TikTok, right? So, for very young children, I think that AI is going to be a game changer in that industry, but I think, sort of the older crowd, and by older, I mean like 15 plus, will see, if in 20 years everybody's, watching, all the studios are putting out AI movies, I think that a 15-year-old is going to see is going to see Dune Part 2 from 2025, I guess. Was that this year? And be like, oh, wow, like this is, way better. And I think I don't think it'll be like a mass market adoption thing other than for children stuff.
Mhm. It might be like a nostalgic thing to go back and see an original movie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I hope not, but I mean, I think people would just have the frame of reference of an original movie like ingrained into them and be like, "Oh, I'm not," I just see it as never catching on
Yeah.
because
But it's like,
I
I've
hope.
never grown up with a black and white movie. It's like, I don't think of that at all in the movie film space. So, I don't know, it's like, would our like, the next generation to us, if they don't grow up with a legitimate movie, do they know any difference?
But
Right,
also,
right. Well,
go ahead.
sorry, Turner, you go ahead.
I want to hear what you got to say.
No, but I think, that's another thing where, color, people loved it right away. And they don't love AI right now. So I think it's just gonna be one of those things where hopefully, um, it just doesn't catch on. And I'll give you a great example that happened today. So there's this movie that I've been really excited for. I'm like I love horror movies for some reason. Like I can't stand like the gory ones or anything, but I love like a good kind of unsettling horror movie. And there's this great one called Weapons coming out, or I assume that it's going to be great, coming out in like a little under 2 weeks. It's like 10 days or something. And everybody's been so excited for it, right? Like, I mean, the trailers have been doing really, really well. Sort of like the film community has been really looking forward to it. The director, I can't remember his name, but he directed a great movie a couple years ago called Barbarian, which was sort of like a, sort of surprise, like cult hit. Did really, really well on like a meager budget, right? And this is his like hotly anticipated second movie. It's
Is
got
it
like
Zach
Josh
Cregger?
Brolin. Yeah, Zach Kreger. That's it. Yeah. And so everybody's been so excited for it, like going really, really well. And then yesterday they released, I think, one trailer, and I, you might have to fact check me on this, but apparently they had some like incredibly minor use of AI, and I'm not sure it might have been more major. I don't know. And now everyone, I mean, there's been like a major firestorm on like Instagram and TikTok about it. People saying, I'm no longer going to, I'm still going to watch the movie, but I'm pirating it. That's a huge response. It also happened a year ago with a movie called Late Night with the Devil, which was also a horror movie. All that they did, and I thought that this was sort of outrageous, but I think you better draw a line in the sand somewhere. They had like a poster in a background in the film, like some sort of graphic of some kind, like behind a character. And that turned out to be AI generated. And people found out like a week into the box office run and completely boycotted it. It had been doing great and its performance just fell off a cliff. And so I think that if this keeps up and people keep killing the box offices of movies that use AI, even if it's just in their marketing, I don't think that we'll ever see that adoption. I think it'll be sort of stopped very early on, and that's what I'm hoping for. And so far, it's worked. And Weapons doesn't come out for another 10 days, but judging by the amount of people that are saying they're just going to pirate it instead, I think that studios in the next couple of years will probably decide, this might not be worth it. That's what I'm hoping for.
Something that I'm kinda interested in, because I mean, I'm a computer science student, I'm all in on AI, and I'm
Yeah,
I
yeah,
agree
yeah.
with you
Hey,
a
hey, and
lot.
by the way, I mean, in my day-to-day life, I love it. I mean, it has revolutionized my life. I mean, I can do my day is 30 times more productive with it. So I agree with you there, but creatively, don't love it.
No,
But
no,
sorry.
I agree with you on the creative side too, but what I'm curious about is why people reject AI. Because, like, historically speaking, most people don't, like, immediately reject
Uh-huh.
the new uprising te maybe you always got those some people that are rejecting it, but what we've seen with this mass rejection of AI is just interesting to me, and
Uh-huh.
I partially wonder if it's because it was so artificially, like, in inflated, and then
Yeah.
people became resentful of it. Is that what you would you agree with that sentiment?
I do, I do. And I think the other thing is too, right, is that a huge part of movies is the fact that Brad Pitt can sell a movie, a director like Christopher Nolan can sell a movie. Actually, nowadays, directors sell movies more effectively than movie stars. So, like the Dune movies are an example of that. That's an amazing director, Denis Villeneuve. And so, I think that when you've got this sort of culture, at least in entertainment, of kind of worshiping people and being obsessed with celebrities, whether they're stars or directors, and sort of really admiring them, AI threatens to take all of that away, and I think that that's the element of, like, film that people might actually love the most. I mean, people love the making of it, they love the behind the scenes stuff. That's why Tom Cruise jumping off a cliff does so well, because they know that that was real. It's a
Yeah.
stunt. That's why stunts do so well, is because people know that it's real, and so I think that that's a constant principle for filmmaking that you can take and you can say, "Okay, people love things that they know are real, that is a huge part of it. It doesn't matter what's on screen. They would prefer something to not look as good and to be real than to be CGI and to, not and to not be real, right? And so I think that's really the key determining factor for AI's use in film. I think that that's why it'll ultimately not work. But as far as AI in general goes, I think the reason that people have had such a difficult time adopting it is because I mean, well, I mean, I guess everybody uses it, but I think people kind of are more opposed to the general idea of it, is just because I think, people are fearful about, job market and everything. My sort of optimistic take would be that it will enable people to be much better at their jobs. Um, that would really be my hope, and that would be my, sort of instinct for now. I know that regulation probably isn't going to be super heavy on it, at least in the US, so we'll see. But, I think that would be my hope, is that people just use it as a tool instead. So I think, yeah, I mean, and people are going to be, like myself, like I said, I mean, AI sort of supercharges my day-to-day life, right? Not so much with, like, I always see people on, like, social media talking about how they've used it to, like, draft a letter to a loved one, and I'm like, "What are we doing?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, no, no, no." But, in terms of, like, you know, uh, help me draft a marketing, blurb or something like that, then it's, fantastic. And so that's my hope, is that people are just going to get better at their jobs as a result of it. Because running an AI still takes some effort too. You can't completely replace an employee most of the time. So yeah,
Mhm. So last thing on this train, unless the other two want to
yeah, yeah, yeah.
bet. So what would you do then if one of the people that submits a video to Prevo used AI? What would be your take on it?
So I think, it would be, on sort of a case by case basis. I don't want to completely rule anything out, right? Um, but I think maybe, as I said earlier, like the poster thing, and here's why, right? Here's why I sort of have a different standard for like filmmakers who are in college, is because it can save money, right? The only thing that I would ever require is that it's super upfront about its AI generated parts, makes very clear why it was used, and probably due to the fact that it was budgetary restrictions, and that it was not something that could have been accomplished by a person unless you were to, have like the amount of machinery and the manpower that a Hollywood studio has, right? Um, and so let's say maybe you have a CGI, um, like I said, maybe like you like create like a poster or something because you can't hire a graphics designer, and you fully explain that, then, maybe. And I would never put anything on Prevo that doesn't clearly state that. Now, granted, this isn't something that we've had to deal with, but I think lots of filmmakers, though, and this has just been my experience, right? Is that, most filmmakers are sort of wary of using it even when they know that it could save them money, because they have a bigger aversion to it than anyone else, They're sort of creatively offended by it to some degree, right? And, the filmmakers, every single filmmaker that I've ever known, very proud of their work, proud of the fact that they are who they are, and that they are, sort of creatives and everything. And so I think that there's sort of that aversion to it. So I'm not sure how much AI generated content we're going to see. It would never be anything. I would never accept anything that had more than like a couple of seconds. I'll tell you that. It would, yeah, that would definitely be the cap. It would only be a few seconds, nothing more than that. A few seconds in something that's like 5 minutes long.
Mhm.
I 100% agree with um, the creatives and people making these films that um, don't want to use AI. I'm a musician. I play viola in the orchestra. I play in a couple of professional orchestras around Texas, and the magic of going to a live performance or watching
Yeah.
a film is it's like, whoa, I can't do that. That
Mhm.
person can, and it makes me feel this way. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And
Yeah.
I listened to a TED talk a while ago that they were it was a music what the person who like if you go and record in a studio, they put it all together and the producer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And he came on stage and was talking about how AI can do all these things and match a person's voice, which we know through TikTok and Instagram Reels,
Mhm.
where they'll slap
Yeah.
someone's face on there and make them speak using AI, and it sounds real. And
Mhm.
he said, "Okay, audience, listen. We're gonna do 2 examples. One is AI, and one is the recording of the real song." And so
Mhm.
the first one plays, and it sounds great. It sounds exactly like I think it was Ariana Grande. So they're playing
Mhm.
an Ariana song, and it sounded just like her. She was like, "Okay, that's the first one. Now the second one starts playing. It sounds the exact same, right? And the audience is enjoying it, maybe, but they're just listening. And then Ariana Grande walks out from backstage onto the stage while she's singing, and everyone freaks out. And they're like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, this is amazing." And the energy in the room went from this to the most excited concert at a TED Talk that you've ever seen, right?
Yep.
And his whole point with this was it's the seeing someone perform and do these things that you can't do and experiencing it and getting the goosebumps on your arm that
Yep.
gets you excited. Even if AI can do just as good as Ariana Grande.
Mhm. Well, and, I think, here's the other thing about AI, and, this will evolve, but, I think AI, obviously, you know, at some point in the future, I think it'll probably be, 5 to 10 years, right? We'll get an AI who's, like, smarter than a human, right? And that's an AGI, or I think there's also, like, an ASI or whatever it is, right? I'm sure you have a much better idea, but, you know, I I think, sure, maybe smarter and sure maybe have, like, a larger, um, breadth of knowledge and a deeper knowledge of concepts and a better ability to apply them and see the connections, right? But, that is still information that it has learned, right? And it's sort of databasing all of that. And so if you've got an AI generated thing, a film, let's say, you're going to be able to recognize so many elements from other things that it has been trained on, and that if it has an iconic shot in the film, that iconic shot is gonna be borrowed from something else. And, I could be sort of wrong on that, you'd have to correct me, but that's sort of my understanding of it.
I mean, you're spot on with it being trained on certain things,
Mhm.
and that opens up a whole another realm of like, well, I mean, I wouldn't call it the other side of the debate. It's just a bunch of interesting facts. Is like one of the questions that I ask when I hear people like talk about that is like when you have any other like human producers, like, well, where do they get their ideas from? And that's my question in response to that. But it's like, but either way, it's a great point.
Absolutely. Well, I think the thing that, really, and obviously you can sort of have, different like styles and everything, but I think that the people that, have gotten the most success, especially like nowadays, like I'm trying to think of, like David Fincher's and Quentin Tarantino's and stuff, they all have like a very, very distinctive style that, spins off of itself and that, grows and evolves. And I'm not sure, and I might be wrong, but I'm not sure really if you could get that same sort of style that grows and evolves and sort of references, itself and grows on itself and sort of evolves to new points that, someone might not have been able to think of who was just, had a different mindset or whatever. So, you know,
It's like to kind of like encapsulate everything. It's like an AI might have all the knowledge in the world it needs to make a film,
Yeah.
but it will never have the human experience.
Yes.
And that's not a scientific claim, that's a philosophical claim.
Yes.
yeah. And it's definitely true. I mean, it's impossible. Yeah. And I think, if you want to have something that, really connects with people. And, connecting with people doesn't mean, having to make them cry or anything. But if you want to connect with people on any kind of level, make them feel anything, I think, yeah, I think that you really need a human, other than maybe something that's as base level as, oh, that's cute, like the kangaroo, or maybe like, oh, haha, this is funny. And I know that it's AI and that's kind of why it's funny on TikTok, right? But I think that people go to the movies to, really feel something and feel something sustained. And they want to feel a lot of different things, right? Throughout a movie. Even if you go to F1, a romance, there's some sad elements to it, right? And so I think that that's why people go to the movies. And as you said, AI will never have the human experience. And so if it doesn't have that, I don't know how it's going to be able to, kind of impact anybody's human experience.
I'm looking up in ChatGPT if it thinks that humans will always make better movies than AI.
That's a great idea.
It's it said in its first message, AI might be able to make a movie that looks and feels as good as a human one, but whether or not it can make something emotionally resonant, meaningful, or original is in the question. But it
So
kind of
there
just
you go.
it quoted things that people have said, and so I'm asking it, what do you think as an AI?
There you go.
Let's see.
The same thing applies to art too.
Yeah.
Exact same thing.
Yeah. And yeah, I think people really love, like, not just, people, but not just other people, but people love effort and people admire like genius and talent. And I think that there are so many elements to why people like art of any kind. I think a big part of it is that talent. And it's something that, it's the effort that goes into stuff that people really like. And I think that prompting a movie, not going to be able to get the same response from people.
Yeah. It's it's very interesting though. Is like I'm kind of picturing I'm kind of like going from start to finish of a movie is as much as I imagine how it goes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'm thinking it's like, okay, so you might, I mean, I don't know how it goes typically in the brainstorming process for a movie, or maybe it's just revelation on
Mhm.
like, oh, this is going to be a great idea. But I can imagine there's going to be some people out there that are going to be using AI to give them the initial idea. Maybe it evolves over time, but they
Mhm.
got the
Right.
initial idea from AI. And then it comes down the road and you're using the AI to maybe plan out the scenes. I don't know how
Mhm.
they'll do it. And
Right.
this isn't generative, well, I mean, in a way, it is generative AI, whether you're
Mhm.
conversing with a chatbot or whatnot. Um, and then you'll get to the point where you're filming it, and like now this is kind of a little bit AI hands off. Then you'll go into
Uh-huh.
the editing stage, and you'll use AI for who knows what when it comes to cutting things up, and then you'll use AI for the management and to figuring out how to it's like
Yeah,
AI
yeah,
is
yeah.
for everything, but the thing that we're targeting specifically is the generative AI and what's on screen. So,
Yes.
what's your take on that then?
I think, my problem with it, right, is so, like, if there's any element of AI that kind of hits the creative process,
Yeah.
or
Okay.
that's where I get into it, right? So any of the management, I think is totally fine. I think that if someone used AI to write a script and then that came out, I think that it would be like, I don't think that, I think it would be apocalyptic for the movie, right? And for that writer, I think it would be like the end of their career. But I think that, to be honest, I mean, when you use AI, and this is again, sort of to my, current usage of it, which I know is going to grow and evolve rapidly. But I think that if you're trying to use AI to like write a script or get ideas, you're going to get things once again that aren't original and that aren't worth paying for, or and a studio has to buy the script, right? A lot of the time, and so I think that if you're getting stuff that's unoriginal, you're not selling that. I mean, I can see maybe someone using it for light polishes to like grammar or, editing, punctuation, that kind of stuff. Or maybe like even bouncing an idea off of it. But I think that for that idea generation and like story beats and everything, I think you're not going to get a result that's worthy of being purchased by a studio or by being watched by somebody.
Mhm. All right, well, that's awesome. I don't want to just cut off the conversation here, but um, I guess to conclude that thought,
Yeah.
we just hope and pray for the day not to come that vibe filming is a thing.
Yes, I agree. I completely agree. Yes. I could not agree with you more there.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. All right, cool. Well, Turner, Daniel, do you guys have any closing thoughts? Anything else you want to touch on?
Vibe filming is hilarious. Austin's gonna get a kick out of that when he hears it.
It's pretty good.
So we had a guy on named Austin Geyser. He's doing an AI consultancy firm, and
Mhm.
he's very smart, a couple years older than us, and he
10 years older than us.
yes, he had some thoughts about how you can riz the AI to um, prompt it and everything. It was fun, but where was I going with that? You said, Wes, what did you?
Yeah, Vibe Film. We were talking about
Oh,
Vibe marketing, Vibe sales,
yes,
and
yeah. It'll be interesting for sure. That's funny.
It will be, yeah.
All righty. Cool, cool.
So
Well, yeah, go ahead, Turner.
yeah, you will have, I guess, one more year of a master's at SMU.
So when you do it like right after graduation, they stretch it out and make it longer
Okay.
because like a 2-year one, you're in it like more all the time, whereas my current one stretches out. So I've got like a year and a half left,
Yeah.
which actually works out well for me because I've got a little bit more time day to day to work on Prevo. So it's been a great structure. So
And will you be able to run this full time and sustain yourself?
that is certainly the plan. Yeah.
Awesome. That's
Yep.
amazing. And would you recommend this to another college student? This life approach?
Recommend starting a business?
Yes.
Absolutely. I think that everyone, if it's in your nature, everyone should try to start a business at least once, and college is the best time to do it. So if you're in college right now, do it. You will never have more time to do it and more motivation and more energy to do it than right now. So don't waste any time. Don't procrastinate. Go ahead and get started today.
Awesome. I love it. Daniel, want to wrap us up?
yeah. I've got nothing else. Thanks so much, Ryder, for joining us, man.
Yeah, thank you all for having me. It
How
was
can we get people to?
Oh, yes. So you can follow the company at Prevo, Prevo Streaming, on Instagram and TikTok. We have kind of just started using TikTok, but you can find us on Instagram. And you can also search for Prevo, Prevo, on iOS and Android on their app store, so you can download the app. And then if you want to see all of our stuff, you can go to prevostreaming.com, where you can read more about the company, use the voting feature, all that kind of stuff. And then me personally, you can find me on Instagram at Ryder McNeal 01. I have literally never posted on there before, but I might start soon. I've had it for like 8 years and I've never used it, so might start trying soon though. So yeah.
Good
Sounds
stuff.
great.
All right.
Thanks, Ryder. Appreciate
Of course. Thank you all so much. Had a great time.
Yeah, it was awesome. Cool.
Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap.